Over the last few months, we have done a number of videos about disturbing developments that are taking place in Egypt. We did one where we talked about the Egyptian military buildup in the Sinai Peninsula, which is a violation of the 1979 peace treaty with Israel. We also talked about maneuvers that the Egyptian army was doing, planning for war against Israel, and how disturbing that is. Well, this past week, things just got a whole lot worse. But before we get into that, please make sure to like and subscribe to this channel so you get all of our updates. Make sure to go into the description of this video below and download the free ebook that is available there. This is a collection of columns that I've published over the course of the last year and a half since the beginning of the October 7th war. It gives you a feel for everything we've been through in this war. So go ahead and download that ebook. So to set the stage, let's just understand what Egypt's relationship to the United States is. Egypt is the second largest recipient after Israel of military aid annually from the US. The United States also has military bases in Egypt, which they don't have in Israel. So the US actually spends more militarily in Egypt every year than they do in Israel because of the bases in addition to the military aid. But Egypt is ostensibly known as a moderate Arab country. They've been one of the negotiators and the middlemen in the negotiations with Israel throughout this war. So we think of them as not necessarily one of the good guys, but not one of the bad guys. But again, they're supposed to be an ally of the United States, receiving billions of dollars in aid from the US every year. Well, just last week, the Egyptian and Russian navies conducted a joint naval exercise called Friendship Bridge. It wrapped up on Thursday, April 17th, and according to the official press release, the exercise was conducted by units of the Egyptian and Russian navies over a span of a number of days in the Mediterranean Sea in Egyptian territorial waters. It involved several joint naval formations, live fire artillery exercises, air defense exercises for naval formations. There was also special forces who were involved in this, and they were demonstrating precision and high combat efficiency on both sides and their ability to successfully handle all emergency tactical situations. So here is the Russian Navy getting together with the Egyptian Navy in Egyptian territorial waters in the Mediterranean, conducting a joint naval exercise. Let's also remember that until very recently, the Russians had a naval base on the Syrian Mediterranean coast, just north of Lebanon. But because the Russians were backers of the Assad regime, after the Assad regime fell to the Islamic rebels, that Russian naval base was evacuated. So the Russians are probably looking for a new home, for a new place for their navy in the Mediterranean, and they're working together with the Egyptians. Now, that in and of itself might not be the most alarming, because 2 days later, on April 19th, just a couple of days ago, the Egyptian and Chinese air forces conducted a joint air drill called Eagles of Civilization 2025. And this air drill, this joint Air Force drill, features a range of multi-role fighter aircraft from various models. It's taking place over the course of a few days at an air base in Egypt, and the program includes joint flight operations and training in planning and managing air combat missions. Here we have the Chinese Communist Party Air Force and the Russian Navy both conducting joint exercises, planning for combat situations together with the Egyptians. That's the Chinese Communist Party and the Russians, the two greatest adversaries of the United States. It's no secret that over the course of the last few years, the Chinese Communist Party and the Russians and the Iranians have all signed strategic deals with each other. The Iranians, of course, were manufacturing drones that the Russians used against Ukraine. China buys Iran's oil. So the Chinese Iranian-Russian axis has really become a power source that has been challenging the West, challenging the United States, and of course being very hostile to Israel. And here is the Egyptians, who receive billions of dollars a year in various kinds of assistance from the United States, military assistance. Their army was basically built by the United States, and they're conducting joint military maneuvers with America's greatest adversaries. Let's add into the mix that back in February, after President President Trump announced his plan to evacuate Gazan refugees from the war with Israel to neighboring Egypt and Jordan, President Sisi, the head of Egypt, canceled a planned visit to Washington, D.C., an obvious snub and a shocking one after President Trump had made that announcement. And in January 2024, not so long ago, the Egyptians joined BRICs. Now, BRICs is a coalition of countries led by the Chinese and the Russian who are trying to create an alternative to the US dollar to weaken the US dollar status as the prime reserve currency, something that is viewed by the Americans as a hostile maneuver. And here are the Egyptians, again, a major recipient of aid from the United States, who joined this effort to take down the economic primacy of the US dollar. So if we put all the pieces together, we have to ask ourselves, has Egypt completely changed sides? Egypt is supposed to be a pro-Western moderate Arab nation. Again, they're a major recipient of aid from the United States. They're supposed to be something of an ally of the United States. And here they are joining BRICs, snubbing President Trump, and engaging in active military exercises, planning for combat situations together with America's greatest adversaries, the Chinese Communist Party and the Russians. So this is a very disturbing situation, and I believe that it is time for the United States to wake up and realize that Egypt is no longer a friendly state. In the shifting sands in the Middle East of whose side different people are on, it's pretty clear, from the military buildup in the Sinai to joining BRICs to engaging in these joint military maneuvers with the Chinese and the Russians, that the Egyptians have changed sides. They are no longer a friend of America. They are no longer a friend of the West.